I want to welcome everyone. At this time, we'd like to introduce our presenter, Michael Supe Granda, and it rhymes with panda. You want to say Granda, but I've learned. And the soup and the sandwiches played at Misty's place Saturday night, and he did a house concert yesterday. But I knew it'd be good when I went to Misty's, but it was full, and that's a pretty big place. And it was excellent music, excellent musicians. And someone said, how can those guys sing so well while they're singing tongue-in-cheek? And because a lot of that stuff is hilarious. You know, it's songs with jokes. I mean, that's hitting it from two angles. And so at this time, our Mr. Granda, who came here in '69 from St. Louis, and he still has some St. Louis connections, was here and played in a little band, Family Tree, and at the Bijou, he met this guy down here back then, and along several of us, and then a Daredevil thing, and then he moved to Nashville and played with Vassar Clements and I mean, no telling who all, and he'll tell you. And he's written a book or two, and no telling what else he can do. He's a well-talented guy, and we'd like to introduce him to you, Michael Supe Granda. You can jump up on that side.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, folks. Good afternoon. I'm thrilled that you decided to come spend the next 30, 40 minutes. I'd like to thank Bob. I'd like to thank Chris. Music Monday of the Ozarks is a very cool thing. This isn't about self-promotion and my latest project. This seems to me to be more of a study in history, which I think is very good. So welcome to History 101. I'm your professor, Mr. Granda. So keep it down, would you? No. I'd like to start by saying that I didn't grow up in Springfield. I didn't go to high school here. I knew nothing about Parkview and Glendale and Hillcrest. I didn't move here till 1969. When I moved here, I was already a card-carrying pothead. And growing up in St. Louis, like any other St. Louis kid, I was obsessed with, and my fantasy and my dream was to play baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals. I just knew I was going to be the second baseman. Until I got to be about 13 years old, and I realized that I was just turning into an average white guy. I couldn't jump, I couldn't rebound, I couldn't tackle, I couldn't block, I couldn't run, I couldn't do any of that stuff. That's the bad news. Now the good news is the Beatles came along, okay? And I got bit by the Beetle bug just like all y'all. So I put a band together. And I was a band leader in St. Louis for 5 years before I even came down here to Springfield. I knew nothing about Springfield. I knew nothing about the Ozarks. Absolutely nothing until it came time to graduate from high school. And back then, the draft counselor was a legitimate occupation. And it said, if you can stay out of Vietnam if you go to college. I said, well, I want to go to college. I want to go to college. I like accruing knowledge. You know, I like interesting things. It interests me. So I stayed out of Southeast Asia by coming to Southwest Missouri and going to Southwest Missouri. I'm sorry, I have a hard time calling it Missouri State. you know? I'm still an SMS guy. I still remember the gray t-shirts with the purple SMS on the front, or as we like to call it, it's a mess. But when I moved down here in 1969, those 5 years I was a band leader in St. Louis. Now, growing up in St. Louis in the 60s was very cool because I got to see Jimi Hendrix. I got to see, well, I didn't see the Beatles, but I saw the Stones and the Yardbirds and the Kinks and the Grateful Dead, you know? I came down to Freudenberger dorm, and when I loaded all my stuff into the Freudenberger dorm, I'm sure I had a little envelope of mushrooms in my belongings. And I didn't really have a whole, well, I did want to go to college, but I was more interested in music. I taught myself how to play the guitar for 5 or 6 years. I got pretty good, you know, not real good, but pretty good, and I would get better, as a 19-year-old kid usually does. And I came down here in the summer of 1969. My folks dropped me off the SMS campus, SMS once again. And I went and heard a band. I went, oh, a band. Oh, I'm gonna go to hear the band. It was the Lavender Hill Mob. So I'm listening to the Lavender Hill Mob. Now, I just heard the band with Bob Dylan, and I just heard Cream. I just went and saw Cream, which was the heaviest thing ever on the planet. So here I am standing in front of the Lavender Hill Mob. Oh, okay. I went, well, okay. Jeremiah was a bullfrog. Okay. So that was my introduction to Springfield music. After that, I heard a band called The Bubble. And I heard a couple other little local Springfield bands. And, you know, after seeing the Cream and the Who and the Grateful Dead, I wasn't, you know, really knocked out by the Lavender Hill Mob. But it was all right, and it was fine. Till about 2 weeks later, I'm walking to class. School starts, and I'm going to class. And I see a poster up on the wall. Now, I've always been, and I still am to this day, a fan of band names. I love band names. So I'm standing in front of this poster, and I said, man, I have to go hear the guys who had a band meeting and decided to call their band Granny's Bathwater. What in the world is this gonna be? After I finished laughing my ass off, I went to see Granny's Bathwater, and it was Lloyd Hicks, Dave Pease, John Dillon, and a gentleman who I think is pretty underappreciated in the Springfield history books, is Michael Bungie. There you go. So I'm standing in front of these guys, and they're playing Bo Diddley, and they're playing Chuck Berry, and they're playing Jimmy Reed songs. And I went, oh man, I found my people, you know? And I became an instant fan of Granny's Bathwater. Afterwards, I go up, I introduce myself, and I said, I really like your band. They said, oh yeah, well, come out Friday night. We're playing at a club called the Half a Hill Club. That's kind of a silly name for a club, but I'll be there. So I went out to see Granny's Bathwater at the Half a Hill Club, and I thought I was in heaven. Because not only were they up there rocking and rolling and swinging, and they had beer. And I was only an 18-year-old kid, but it didn't seem to matter down here in the Ozarks. So I walked in, I was drinking beer, some girl asked me to dance, it was great, Granny's was rocking and rolling, and on the breaks, everybody'd go out to the parking lot to get sideways. And I love that too. So I said, oh, this is great. While I'm out there, I run into a gentleman by the name of Chris Albert. There he is, Chris Albert right there. And had you just moved up from Dallas?
No, California.
From California. And I just come down from St. Louis, and I said, man, I'm looking to put together a band. And he says, so am I. So we put a band together on the spot and became the Great Sloth. Once again, there's another classic band name for you. So we put a band together, we rehearsed a few times, and Halloween 1969, we played our first gig up on Commercial Street at the 4-star Opry House. I don't even think it's there anymore. But I said, okay, we got to make an impression. This is my first gig in Springfield. Okay, I got to make it. So I had this Superman shirt that I wore, and I was the lead singer. And so I turned to the guys, and we were getting ready. We were ripping through all of our material, whatever it was, and I said, okay, watch me. Just keep an eye. So I'm going to make an impression. At the last song, I just ripped him his vest and Superman, and I just leapt out at the audience and went, "Ah!" and ran out the front door. And that was the end of the show. So for weeks after that, I'm running into people who say, hey, wait a minute, you're that guy. I went, yeah, you're that guy in that band. Yeah, you're the guy in that band with the Superman shirt on. Yeah. I became Supe. It's a nickname I haven't been able to shake for 40 some odd years, nor have I tried. Can I ask someone to bring me a glass of water, please? Thank you, brother. Got cotton mouth pretty bad. I'm not sure how that happened, but. So, I became a fan of Granny's bathwater. Now, I looked around. Thank you, buddy. And I started to immerse myself in the Springfield music scene. And everywhere I went, I noticed that if I didn't like the man's Three Dog Night covers, I don't like Three Dog Night, or their David Bowie covers, and I'm not a fan of David Bowie, they were still good. The musicianship was very high. I went, oh man, this is great. These guys are really good. And I said, I want to hang out with these guys. I would go back to St. Louis, and I would get together with my friends up in St. Louis, and I said, look, you guys got to come down to Springfield. You got to hear these guys play down there. Man, these guys down there are really good. And it's really not what they play, it's kind of how they play. And a couple of my friends came down from St. Louis, but pretty much I got, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. So I came back down to Springfield and fell in love with the place. Stayed here for 22 years. I'd go down to, the Great Sloth gets a house gig. Whew, wow. The Warehouse Experience downtown. Chris knew the two guys who ran the place, who ironically enough were from St. Louis. And they allowed us, the Great Sloth, to practice in the basement of the club in downtown Springfield. So you know how luxurious the place was. With the smell of wet cardboard boxes, beer, stale beer, mildew, urine. It was just horrible. But we were down in there, and man, we get in there and we just get rocking. It was great. We became the house band, and if the Warehouse Experience had a band cancel on them, they called us. We'd go, oh yeah, we can play that. We'd run downstairs, we'd haul all our equipment up the steps, set it up, and the Great Sloth was the house band at the Warehouse Experience. And once again, I was the lead singer, and I was acting crazy and going nuts. So then I looked around and I went, wait a minute. Okay, Half a Hill Club and the Warehouse Experience. And I looked around and went, well, okay. And then they said, well, there's another club you need to check out. Great Sloth was going to play a gig at Bebop's. Who remembers Bebop's? Okay, now the Half a Hill was on the south side, out by Glendale High School. Bebop's was on the north side, and it was out in the middle of nowhere. And in addition to music and beer, they had barbecue. And I just loved it. So, Half a Hill, Bebop's, Warehouse Experience. I was in Springfield. I didn't know where I was. You know, I was just down here going to college, had no vehicle, no bike, no car. So I had to bum rides to get to all these places to hear all of these bands. So I started hearing all the bands, and they were all really, really good. The school year ends. Okay, what am I going to do? Well, I guess there's nothing to do but go back to St. Louis. So I went back up to St. Louis for the summer, and I got a job putting window air conditioners in houses for old ladies. And that didn't work. I wasn't very good at that. So long about August, Chris calls me, or maybe I heard a commercial on radio up there for a rock and roll festival just south of Springfield, Missouri, starring the James Gang and the Ides of March and Sugarloaf, the Finley River Memorial Festival. And I went, Springfield, Missouri? Oh my God. Oh, Springfield. Oh, I started shaking. And the phone rings, and it's Chris. And he says, when are you coming back to SMS? I said, September the 3rd. I don't know the date, just sometime in September 3rd. He says, well, if you can get back 2 weeks earlier, I know the guy's putting on this festival. And if you can get back here, I think I can get the Great Sloth a slot on the Sunday morning local band portion of the show. I was down here in a heartbeat, folks. I came back down here. I rushed back down to Springfield. I said, oh, I'm back in Springfield. This is fantastic. So we go out, and I'm sure there were other bands on the Sunday morning edition of the local band portion of the show. The only two bands I remember, I'm sure there were others, was the Great Sloth and Granny's Bathwater. Granny's Bathwater came out, and I went, wait a minute. Something's different. Dave Pease was gone. All of a sudden, there was Don Ships. Going, oh, okay, great. John Dillon was phasing out of the band, and they replaced him with a horn section. I'm going, what the? But they were still magnificent. It was great. This is one thing I noticed about Springfield. Not only is the level of musicianship very high, there's a lot of interweaving of musicianship, of musicians. I'd go and I'd hear this band and go, wait a minute, this drummer used to play with them. And this guitar player used to play over there. And this guy's now singing with these guys, and this guy's over here, and all the parts seem to be interchangeable. And I love that. You know, I really, really love that. Page 2. So I started to immerse myself more into the thing. I moved off campus, got a hippie crash pad with a bunch of other people, and there was people coming and going all the time. The House of Nuts and Loonies, we were called. And I started to become better acquainted with the musicians around town. I started to get a couple gigs. That was fantastic. And I said, well, this is magnificent. Now, another school year goes around, and we're at the summer of, what would that make it, spring of 71, summer of 71. And I said, I'm not going back to St. Louis. I'll do whatever it takes to stay in Springfield and hang out with these musicians, you know? So I got a job down here. My job was painting stripes onto the parking lots of malls and grocery stores. So at 2 a.m. when there were no cars on the parking lot, me and a couple other guys were out there spraying the lines on the Battlefield Mall parking lot and the Kroger parking lot. But I was determined to stay in Springfield because I loved it down here so much. Another reason why I think the level of musicianship here is so high. Okay, when I was growing up in St. Louis, I never gathered around the radio to listen to the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night. My father hated the Grand Ole Opry. My father hated that twangy, get that, I don't care about your whiskey, I don't care about your wife, I don't care about your dog, get that off. Let's play some more Frank Sinatra. So that's kind of how I was brought up. I never heard country music till I moved down here. Now, I would go and I would see Granny's, and they were rocking, and I would go see these other bands, and I began to go and see country music bands, guys playing country music. And I went, man, this is fantastic. Man, this is just, why wasn't I exposed to this? The Ozark Jubilee, when it packed up its tent, here's my theory. When it packed up its tent and moved to Nashville, I guess, there were some musicians here in the Ozarks who said, wait a minute, you're moving where? Well, I'm not doing that. I'm not uprooting my family. Look at this place. Hills, trees, fresh water, fresh air, fishing. This is paradise. I'm not leaving this. So they didn't. And so they stayed here in the Ozarks, and they're beautiful musicians. And that's one of the reasons why I think the level of musicianship around here is so high, remains so high. It's just like when they were pushing westward. Go west, young man, go west. And America were pushing west across the country. And they left Missouri, and they got to Oklahoma. And they, come on, we got to press west. You know what the smart ones did? They turned around and came back to Missouri. They said, you can have your tumbleweeds and your wind and all that. We're going back to Missouri. Missouri is a beautiful state. Okay, summer of '71, and I'm down here and I got a job painting lines on parking lots. And I'm starting to really immerse myself into the music community. On the radio, I hear an advertisement for the new Bijou Theater. I went, oh man, Harvey Mandel, gonna play at the new Bijou Theater? Could it be the Harvey Mandel? So I found the new Bijou Theater. And I went to the new Bijou Theater. And it was a fantastic place, run by a couple gentlemen, Mr. Kurt Hargis, and once again, another gentleman who I believe doesn't get enough credit around town, Steve Canaday. And I went, and they had me come in. The bass player, Jimmy Reed's bass player, didn't show up one night. And they called me in a panic. Supe, bring your bass down here. Jimmy Reed. So I came down, I played with Jimmy Reed. And I saw Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. I was going, man, these cats are great. You know, how come there's not more black artists playing around town? When I was in St. Louis, The Who didn't play every night. The Grateful Dead and Jimi Hendrix didn't play every night. I would go and hear the local bands up there. A lot of them were black bands. And I would go, and they were just magnificent. Chuck Berry, back in the 60s, Chuck Berry had a band. Chuck Berry had a farm up there where we'd go out to his farm and just go nuts. Ike and Tina Turner from St. Louis. The Isley Brothers. And my favorite of all was Oliver Sane. Oliver Sane was smooth. And his band was smooth. And they all moved together. And and the drummers and the guitar players were magnificent. And I saw these bands, and they got into just like Otis Knight in the day in the movie Animal House. these bands were up there and they were rocking, they were rolling, they were sweating, and they were drinking, and they were smoking, and they were snorting, and they were testifying, and they were just going. And I was in the audience doing the same thing. So when I got down here, well, wait a minute. This energy that these bands had, I brought with me. I was going, okay, we got to the New Beecher Theater, and there it was. There was Jimmy Reed just going nuts, and Sonny Terry and Bronny McGee. I went, oh, this is great. And then the family tree got together at the New Beecher Theater. Kurt and Steve were nice enough to let us use the club on Tuesday afternoons when there wasn't much happening except potato chip salesmen, you know, and a couple, you know, guys stumbled in off the street. So we started playing music on Tuesday afternoons, Thursdays or so, and we started a little band, and we did pretty good. But I was very impressed, as I still am, with the music of the Ozarks, just because it's so good and it's so pure, and like I said, the level of musicianship is very high. This January 22nd, it'll be 25 years since I threw my guitars and my golf clubs in the back of my truck and drove to Nashville. I lived in Springfield for 22 years. I've been down there for 25, so I've lived there longer than I've lived here. But I still have my dearest friends, some of which are here today, and I continue to love coming back here and playing music and interacting with the musical community of the Ozarks. And I guess I always will. So the Daredevils started, and we started playing, we started traveling around the world, but we never really worked that much. Our heaviest year, I think, was maybe 100 gigs. That gave me 265 off days. I went, well, what am I going to do? So I met one of my favorite Springfieldians, a guy by the name of Jim Wonderly. Jim Wonderly said, and Terry Wilson was playing in the band, so I said, Terry said, man, Jim Wonderly and our drummer friend Tom Whitlock, why don't we put a little band together? I went, let's do it. So we put together the Dog People, and we started playing around town, and we would play 4 hours a night, 5 nights a week, 3 weeks a month, 11 and a half months a year. We just went nuts, and I just loved it. And all the people of Springfield kind of came and embraced us. And then that was fantastic. Then I put a band called Soup and the Sandwiches. I started writing songs. I put that together. And I got Bill Brown, Don Ships, Mark Wilhoit, and Jerry Rivella. And we started doing that. And we were just rocking and rolling. I was going, man, I still go up to St. Louis and say, guys, you got to come down to Springfield. You got to see what's happening down here. There is a real thing happening. But they said, if you don't want to come down, I'll see you later. I'm going back to the Ozarks. And I put together, well, I didn't really put it together, but another band I enjoy playing around town with is a band called the Garbanzos. They may be my favorite. But all of these bands were, the same passion and fire burns in me today that burned in me when I had my $30 guitar and I learned how to play Do You Love Me, Boom, and Woolly Bully, and I still have that same passion in me now that I had back then, and I've never lost it. When I decided to move to Nashville, I decided to go down there because I wanted to further my songwriting. And I knew that if I stayed up here, I could put together a really cool band, and I could play around town 5 nights a week. But I didn't really want to do that because I started to get a little older, and I didn't want to stay up till 4 a.m. every night. So I went down to Nashville. I said, I'm going to give it a year. If nothing happens in a year, I'm going back to Springfield. Got to about 11 months, and I loved it down there just the same way I loved it when I moved here. And I got a call from Michael Clark, the drummer from the Byrds. He said, we need a bass player. Can you be in Louisville Saturday night? Well, sure. He says, well, we'll send you a tape. We'll send you a tape. I went, you don't need to do that. I already knew all those Byrds songs. So I started playing with the last incarnation of the Byrds. Of course, it was just Michael Clark, the drummer, but it was the Byrds. So I did that for about a year. So I said, well, maybe I will stay in Nashville. That's 25 years ago. But this past weekend, I got the opportunity to come up and play Saturday night with some old buddies of mine. I called them up. I said, let's get together. Let's go and play some rock and roll music. Let's drink some beer. Let's tell some stupid jokes. Let's get in there. Let's rock and roll. Let's get in there smoking, snorting, sweating, just like we used to. And it was fantastic. And I will continue to come back until till I can't go anywhere, I guess, But it's been a wonderful life. And most of my growing up was right here in the Ozarks. Most of my musical, my musical thing was formed right here in Springfield, and I'll never forget that. And for that, I want to thank every one of you who contributed to that, as all of you have. I'm very fortunate to have been asked to come speak to y'all today. I've had a great time. And so they say questions, if anybody has questions. Yes, Kurt.
Cash used to tell me about a story that happened maybe in New Orleans. You got mixed up with some gals down there maybe and got thrown in jail. Could you embellish that story a little bit?
No. Any other questions? Yeah. We got to New Orleans. And it was Cinco de Mayo, which is Steve Cash's birthday. And we had a night off in New Orleans. So we went out to dinner and got completely hammered. So we go back to the hotel, and Steve's going, wait a minute, it's my birthday, damn it. And he rushes off into the French Quarter. I went, oh my God, he's gonna get rolled. So I said, well, I'm not tired, I'll go with you. So it was he and I in the French Quarter at about 2:30 a.m., and he's in a bar, and he's leaning out the window like this, and I'm standing outside on the street at the window, leaning up against the window like this, and he and I are talking, and everything is fine, till the policeman comes up to me, and he does one of these. You're under arrest. You get over by that police car right now. Give me some identification. I went, what? They just came through and they were sweeping up loiterers. So I got arrested for loitering with intent. They put me in the back of the police car. Steve Cash goes ballistic. Hey, wait a minute. He wasn't doing anything. He's my friend. But he said, you can't do this. And the car drives off with me in the back seat and a couple other guys. And he's just out on the street going, and I saw him get real little. They put me in jail, and me and these two other guys, they rounded up. They threw us in, and I think when they threw us in there, they woke up 2 or 3 whores who were also in the same holding cell. So there I was, me and 2 other drunken guys from Ohio or something, and these whores, and we're sitting in the I was going, well, what are we doing here? Ah, man. I got out of it, but we still laugh about it to that day. But thanks for bringing that up, Kurt.
did you get to meet Mr. Bojangles?
Did I? Yeah, sure. I was Mr. Bojangles, Bob. Yeah, Tom.
Could you give us a little bit of the story from the family tree to the Daredevils, including how the name Daredevils came?
Oh, yeah. Well, when we started out, we were the family tree. Very nice, 2 words, very short, very sweet, very, very organic. When we signed our record record contract with A&M, we discovered that there was already a little bluegrass band up in New England called the Family Tree. They had the name copyrighted, so legally, we had to change our name. So the first piece of business we had to conduct was to change our name. So how do you do that? Well, I guess you just go out and get some beer and you have a name the band party. You should have heard some of these names. They were just, some of them were the Undercover Overalls, that was one of the names. Buffalo Chips, the Burlap Socks. And back in the 70s, we came from the era of hippie bands with long names. The New Riders of the Purple Sage, the Pure Prairie League, the Amazing Rhythm Aces. Who else? Whatever, you get the gist. And one of the names that came out was Cosmic Corncob and his Amazing Ozark Mountain Daredevils. That was going to be our name. We all laughed. It was great. Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen. We were going to be Cosmic Corncob and his Amazing Ozark Mountain Daredevils. Well, the first thing we had to do was take out the word amazing because of the Amazing Rhythm Aces. Okay. And whereas George Frayne steps up front and becomes Commander Cody, none of us wanted to step to the front and become Cosmic Corncob. We were a band. We were a collective. You know, we were just a group of hippie songwriters, you know? So we chopped off Cosmic Corncob and we took out the word amazing, and we were left with the Ozark Mountain Daredevils. So we went from Family Tree to the Ozark Mountain Daredevils. And we didn't really like it, but our manager at the time insisted, and everyone around us insisted that we keep it, and it served us pretty well.
How the nickname the Ducks came about?
The Ducks. Okay, we had a hard time calling ourselves the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, you know? Too long and cumbersome, and we bought a van. First thing we did was bought a van that we hauled all of our equipment around in. And on this van, right under the driver's side window, was a duck decal. Somebody had put a decal of a duck. I guess some duck hunting people. And so we figured, we called it the duck truck. So we figured that if we got in and out of the duck truck, we must be the Ducks. And it was easier for us to say. It was more convenient to call ourselves the Ducks. And there are still people to this day who refer to us as the Ducks. But, you know, amongst ourselves, we said, when are the Ducks playing? What are the Ducks doing? When did the Ducks do this? So we were the Ducks. Well, well, I guess we still are, you know, kind of. You know. Yeah, Kenny.
I've heard a rumor or two about a certain locality, trout farm, and some shenanigans that might have gone on down in there.
Oh, God.
Is there any fishing limit or any licensing procedure in there?
The Nixa Trout Farm?
Yes, sir.
There was zero fishing. The ponds were dry. There was zero fishing.
Pretty good music.
Yeah, there was good music. Granny's there was a house and then a big outbuilding that Granny's had converted into a rehearsal hall. When they moved out, I moved into the house, and the Ducks occupied the rehearsal hall. That's where we rehearsed for, oh Lord, two or three albums. But yeah, it's a Nixa Trout Farm, no fishing, but lots of tomfoolery. Yeah, man.
There's a related question. Sir, up in Morrisville, there was a pretty famous locale where the second or third album was recorded. You have a highlight or two from that you can share with us?
Yes, outside Bolivar, Missouri. The Rudy Valley Ranch is where we would go and rehearse. And so the first album came out, we had a hit. If you want to get to heaven, all right. So the money started to come in. So we asked A&M, we said, can we make the second album on the farm? So we hauled in a big recording truck up the lane and ran all the microphones into the house. And so Jackie Blue, which was on that record, was recorded in a Civil War era mansion. The funniest part about the whole thing was when all these guys came in from LA and Glenn came in from London, the worst thing they hated, they loved all the music, and we had food, and we had wine, and we were just having a great time. The thing they hated the most was ticks. Oh, there's a tick. Oh, I got a tick. Oh, I got a tick. Well, wait till you get a tick, but you won't notice it until you take a shower. There'll be a tick. But yeah, man. Yeah. Tom, you were there.
Okay, I want to know about a Learjet to Prince George, British Columbia. Straight up and straight down.
It's straight up, straight down. So we get a weekend. Here's a weekend. Friday night, the Daredevils are playing Six Flags over St. Louis. We're playing right in front of the roller coaster for all the people in St. Louis at Six Flags. The next night, I think we got a gig. I mean, it may have been $30,000, $40,000, but it was in Prince George, British Columbia. I mean, how are we going to get there? Well, airplanes. Okay, great. Our first flight was from St. Louis to Seattle on TWA. We get to Seattle, and all the flights going north are canceled because of horrible weather. So we said, well, we got this paycheck up there waiting for us. We got to get there. So we chartered a Learjet, and we flew from Seattle somewhere through the Learjet. So we flew up through the clouds, saw Aurora Borealis while we were up there, came back down, and it was still raining. So we got there, and they had a bus waiting for us. Okay, so we get on the bus. Then we drive on the bus till the bus can't go any farther, and they put us on another littler bus. So we go till we can't get it, and then there's the festival. And it's horrible, it's raining, and there's campfires everywhere. At the last leg of our trip, they put us all in the front end of a front loader. So we're going through the mud to get to the stage, and put us up on the stage. So we went airplane, Learjet, big bus, little bus, front loader. But we made the gig, and the next morning we got up and said, let's get out of Dodge here. And we came right back. We were only up there for one day, but that was a funny, were you on that gig?
Yeah, man.
Okay, yeah.
The guy with the knife that came up to Dylan and said, you're going to play, you want to get to heaven? He goes, yes, sir, twice.
Yeah, and it was where the biker gang, who was the security, was kind of huddled all around the amplifiers, kind of doing this on amplifiers, and I wasn't about to tell them to leave the stage. It was a wild-ass gig, I'll tell you what, one of the wildest. Yeah, Chris.
How'd you like working with Glenn Johns?
Glenn Johns, first of all, once we got past the fantasy of working with the guy who just got finished recording Beggar's Banquet and Who's Next, once we got past, I had to keep pinching myself. I'm working with Glenn Johns, amazing. He came in with such professionalism. We were just a bunch of fluttering ducks. You know, we had some good songs. And he came in with his Ginsu knives and sliced up our songs. And he took our 7-minute ramblings and edited them down to 3-minute songs. I went, oh my gosh. And so who was I to say, Glenn, that's a bad idea, man. Terrible idea, Glenn Johns, producer of the Beatles and the Stones. So yeah, we gave him total control, and he produced 2 very good records. The first record came out, we had If You Want to Get to Heaven. Second record came out, we had Jackie Blue. And we said, well, this is easy. Little did we know, you know. The money started coming in, and we started, going off and yeah, and so now we're 46 years down the line, but we still have some gigs, and I still love getting together with those men the same way that I enjoy getting together with all of my other Springfield guys. Yeah, man.
Who was the original family tree, and then who was the original Daredevils?
The names?
No, who were the members? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was John, Dylan, Steve Cash, myself, Larry Lee, Randy Chowning, Bill Jones, and Elizabeth Anderson, and Rick Campanelli was the original family tree. Rick Campanelli left. We replaced him with Buddy Brayfield. And when it came, and then that was a family tree. When we became the Daredevils and we started to make our first record, I believe Bill was busy with Grannies, so he didn't go to make the record. And Elizabeth was doing something else, and so she left, so it was a 6-piece band. We've had as many as 11 people in the band at one time, So it's always been kind of a revolving cast of characters around the three of us, John, Steve, and myself, who've been carrying on for 46 years now. Yeah, Gary.
I know there's some songs in the works. Is an album in the works, and what's the status of that?
Funny you mentioned that. I was in the studio yesterday. We've gone in and we recorded 6 new songs. And we mixed 2 of them yesterday, so there'll be 6 new songs. We can go in and record new music, but once it's recorded, what are you going to do with it? In this modern digital world with, there's not only piracy, but we got downloads, we got instant downloads, we got iPhones, we got iTunes, we can put it on Pandora, we can put it on all these other things. I got my last check, and I think I got 13,000 plays of my songs, and the check was almost $4. So we're running up against that, but we have been in the studio, and we do have new music. So just stay tuned. We'll get it out as however we can. We're just a bunch of old guys. We don't have much, high-tech savvy about us. I still play wooden guitars, and I still go to this, change strings, But we're still at it. Yeah.
I think you did one album with David Kirschenbaum, right?
Yeah.
How was that?
David Kirschenbaum. Well, there's another gentleman who you don't know, not many people know that he was part of the Springfield music scene too. There was David Kirschenbaum and Benny Mahan, Les Gallier, and what was the other band you were talking about earlier, Ed? Les Garland. Yeah, Les Garland. No, you mentioned it earlier. Benny Mahan and the Ravens. Yeah. Right, exactly. But David Kirschenbaum was enlisted to produce one of our records. He was great to work with. That was the album that we recorded it, and then we were going to mix the record, so we decided to mix it in London. So we flew over to London for a month. That's when I met Sid Vicious. That's when I had my 1-week affair with Sid Vicious and those guys. Wow, talk about whatever we're talking about. But yeah, David Kirschenbaum, he was wonderful to work with. And Steve Kennedy played drums in, was it David Kirschenbaum and the Playboys, was it? Yeah. So it was, yeah, right, David Kerr and the Playboy. But, all along the way, we've always kind of embraced people and wanted to make them feel included. And we're doing that to this day. And we're a very fortunate group of men. Now, before I go, I want to get to the part of the show where, when I end up, I brought some things with me from Springfield. These might not mean a whole lot to the rest of the world, but they may mean a whole lot to Springfield. I brought this. Don Ship's Bill Brown and Mark Wilhoit. You want to hear those guys play their asses off? I brought a box of these. So I'll get them out, just throw $5 and take as many as you want, $5 and a piece and take them. The other thing I brought, if you want to hear Jim Wonderly, I don't have many of these left, so I brought the last box of them. The Dog People made an album. If you want to hear Jim Wonderly at his funniest and his most ignorant stick, the greatest guy in the world, here they are. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. Hope you had a good time. And until the day I die, I hope that what little part I played in the music of Springfield and the Ozarks, I'm very proud of it, and I hope it continues. God bless you.